Today is day 18 of my 30 Days of Positivity Challenge. I did not post on day 17, me personally, because I needed to rest. And rest is a powerful, powerful agent of change, which I'll be focusing on today. But for day 17, I did post a video that brought a smile to my heart. Hopefully you've watched it or you'll watch it and it brings a smile to yours. But along the lines of the discussion about change, it was really ignited by a conversation I was having earlier with some colleagues about listening. And I'll get to the connection between listening and change a little bit later, but just follow me for a little bit. Listening really occurs on 3 levels, levels 1, 2, and 3. Level 1 is when you are listening to respond rather than listening to understand the full scope of what someone is saying in order to respond accurately and with the intent of moving the conversation in the right direction. You are listening to prove points versus listening to understand and receive the fullness of what someone is saying. Level 2 is when there's this beautiful dance between two people, the transactions or the transmission of information going back and forth is seamless. It's with all positive intent. This is where values tend to show up. I understand that person's values. They understand my values. It's received and given with positive intent. But this is also where those vulnerabilities show up and we're able to tackle those in those conversations in a meaningful and a loving way. Level 3 is the best place to be. It's that out-of-body experience where, well, I mean, not say that's necessarily the best place to be because all level 3 experiences are not necessarily the best. But there's this out-of-body experience where it's just you and that person and nothing else. Some of us experience level 3 when we have moments of crisis where we have to listen intentionally to everything that person is saying. We're understanding their body language, their inflection of their voice. Everything is just lasered in. But the moments where many of us probably understand, because this is how it shows up in our lives, is when we have in love with that person. You're in love with that person and you're just sitting there like, I love you. How else is your day? And because you can't do anything else, you're so smitten, you're so focused in on the being of that person and the being of that moment that you're listening and receiving it on a totally different level. But the one thing that really connects all levels of listening is that you are receiving, and through the receipt of information, you spark change, right? Because the information that you put into your body impacts your perspective and your thoughts. And when your thoughts are impacted, that impacts your actions and what you put out into the world, and thoughts become things. And many people that I work with or some people that I encounter, they are like, oh my God, that's a load. I can listen to what I want to. I can watch what I want to. But people with skin conditions will tell you that when you change your diet, you will change how your skin presents itself to the world. It's no different for what you put in your ears and what you put in front of your eyes to watch, because it changes your spirit. It changes the being of who you are. Sometimes it changes it for the best, sometimes it changes it for the worst. So you have to be very mindful of how you receive and process those things. But people sense energy, and when you are filled with negative energy, it will spill out into the people around you, and they will not want to be around you because they don't want it to change them. They aren't strong enough to handle some types of energy of change and agents of change, right? So when I look at the dimensions of change, I put them into 4 different buckets. Internal that I can control, internal that I cannot control, external that I can control, and external that I cannot control. And I tend to focus on internal and mostly those things that I can control, because I often say you can only control what you can control, and that is yourself. So internal will be my focus. There's some nuances around external change, which is really focused and centered around influence. You can influence things externally, but not always change them. And there's some things within yourself that you cannot control, but you can influence them. I can't change or control the fact that my cells are going to age and die. but I can influence them to slow that process up a little bit by putting better things in my body. Sometimes you can't control that your mind goes to a negative place. Our thoughts just wander. Something happens in our physical space and it triggers something. Oh my God. But I can influence it in a positive direction by putting positive things into my mind. Because that's how you build. That's how you build your strength, right? It's like going to the gym. You don't just go to the gym and you all of a sudden you're just the strongest person out there. No, you have to exercise that muscle. You have to exercise the muscles of change, because not all of us are open to change. Many of us are change averse. And that's okay, because everybody has to start from a baseline. And everybody has to realize that change is inevitable whether or not you like it or not. Nothing you can do about it. That's why we have seasons. Nothing you can do about it. The only thing that you can do is prepare for the season to come. You aren't going to say, oh my God, I can't believe you. I'm just going to complain about winter coming. No, you're going to go out there and you're going to go buy some winter coats. Or if you can't afford winter coats, you're going to buy several layers of things, or go to the Goodwill to pick up a coat, something. You're going to prepare. But the first thing that we run into, the first biggest challenge that we run into when it comes to change, is how we talk to ourselves, right? How we talk to ourselves. And there are three things that I tend to do to try to embrace change and become a lot more open to it, so that it is much more of an easy process. One is I listen to myself and I talk to myself a lot differently. But listening to yourself is the hardest thing in the world, right? Yesterday I listened to myself, I listened to my body, because my body said you need to sit down, so I sat down. Easy discussion, right? Everything isn't always going to be that easy. You're going to stay at that job for longer than you need to stay at that job, even though you should have left, because you have been having that internal dialogue with yourself and you haven't listened to yourself, because I believe yourself didn't tell yourself or give yourself a true reason why. It was bad, but it wasn't that bad. You didn't really have a reason why. And many times we won't change until we're forced to. Look at us all now, sitting at home. A lot of times we won't change, or we won't do that project that we've been meaning to get around to in the garage for however long, until we're forced to. You won't call up that relative that you've been meaning to call because they're so important to you, until now you're forced to. I remember when I went to a training one time and the guy said, you know what the secret to change is? The first step is you got to come up with an alarming reason why you need to change. And this is for things that are really, really, really hard for you to change. You have to come up with an alarming reason. And many of us haven't come up with an alarming reason. So you sit in it until you're sometimes forced to. Right? And listening to yourself, again, it's a very hard thing to do, especially because you're fighting with yourself. The second thing is that I try to do is I try to always lead with compassion. It's so interesting that right now we have millions of Americans sitting at home. We can't sit in the house for 10 seconds without like, oh, I need to go out. I need to drive around for 4 hours just because. But yet we justify the incarceration of millions of men and women across America for the most minuscule things. And we say, oh, well, they were criminals. They stole $100 worth of something. Just lock them up. Real easy for you to say that now. How do you feel about that while you're sitting in a similar situation with only a fraction of the restrictions that they have? You gotta have compassion, because you never know when you're gonna be sitting in that same situation. And now you have a whole bunch of Americans. We need to get out. Let us out. Let us out. This is unconstitutional. Okay. It's cruel and unusual punishment. Well, it's cruel and unusual punishment for people to be sitting in jail for years upon years for petty things. Oh my God, they had weed. Now weed is being legalized nationally, and now you have folks clamoring toward it as a business opportunity. Stop it. The compassion only comes now that people are making money off of it. And so I tend to lead with compassion. And then the last thing is building communities of trust and openness, because sometimes people won't allow themselves to change when they aren't in an environment that's conducive for change. The environment is, honestly, it's really the basis of change. A flower can't grow if it's in the middle of a desert. Not gonna happen. Not a rose. Rose won't grow if it's in the middle of a desert. You have to create the conditions for change to happen. Trusting and loving and nurturing conditions for the change to happen, because if those things don't happen, it will never happen. That's it. And Socrates said, I'll end with this. Socrates said that the secret to change is not in fighting the old, but in building the new. So what are you focusing on building? For yourself, for your family, for your legacy? Think on that. Have a good day.